Throughout all the ifs, what could have beens, and what should have been for the Chicago Bulls, I think one thing is starting to be real evident with the Chicago Bulls front office. Arturas Karnisovas suffers from completion anxiety, and that's definitely going to continue to limit and hurt the Chicago Bulls. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, what are the Bulls' kind of focuses at the trade deadline as it nears and gets closer and closer? And we're going to preview today's game against the Denver Nuggets. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, and I want to start off with kind of what I alluded to. Arturas Karnisovas, completion anxiety. Now, am I a little bit exaggerated in that? Maybe a little bit, but I think when I lay out my theory here, people are going to kind of understand it, right? When you look at this team, right? AK came into this and initially stated that his goal was going to be going younger and building organically through the draft. About 4 months later than that, we traded most of our young players. We traded away 3 or 4 future draft picks, and we got Nikola Vucevic. Well, we didn't, at that point, we only traded 2 for future first-round picks, but then a couple of months later, we traded more to get DeMar DeRozan in here, and eventually just turned into the situation that, you know, the Bulls traded most of their young players and they traded most of their young future assets to go, for a team that's under and try to go win now mode to try to convince Zach LaVine to stay. Now, with that team, it did suffer some injuries to Lonzo Ball, which really limited and hurt that team in the trajectory that it was on. But even with that time, things that the team needed that were clear and evident that the team needed, AK couldn't really go out and get, right? He couldn't really go out there and get it done. Now, you have to have a partner. You have to have players that want to come here to get all those things done, I understand. But we never did, right? And so that team continued to kind of just lavish around with it getting worse year after year, right? The record got worse each year. And then now you look at this team and we sit in a place where we've kind of gone at a crossroads yet again. We've gone younger in trading away DeMar DeRozan in the sign-in trade, getting rid of Alex Caruso. This team is 3 years younger on average than what it was last year. And it seemed like the Bulls were finally going to go that path where they were going to go younger and finally go that route that AK talked about before. Younger, develop through the draft. Let's build this thing more organically. But now, reportedly, even with AK taking a lot of calls on the Bulls players that we have here, and even reportedly coming down some on the value that he has, he cannot pull the trigger on the move. AK has completion anxiety on really getting to wherever he has and keeps leaving his foot in two worlds. Per the Chicago Sun-Times, right, and other outlets as well, they say that Karnisovas has been looking to trade Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, and Lonzo Ball since the offseason, and has been looking to deal LaVine even longer. Now, we know that LaVine recently came out. He wants to stay in Chicago. Great things there, right? And as it keeps going on, it seems like that AK has basically taken calls on almost everybody on the roster, right? Saying this as much. Karnisovas would be willing to part with anyone on the roster if he thinks it would make the Bulls a better team in the long run and help them keep their top 10 protected pick this summer. A source reiterated that Karnisovas has come down on what teams thought were unrealistic asking prices earlier in the season, but that doesn't mean he's willing to simply give players away. The Sun-Times have also reported that what happens with Butler carries a lot of weight because that's the first trade domino that has to fall. That has to lead to some frustration around the league for teams trying to get non-Butler business done. So, again, completion anxiety, right? And when you look at completion anxiety, it really kind of is exactly what you're looking at with this team. This team just doesn't have the ability, like AK is not really shown it. Completion anxiety is defined by this. A type of anxiety when someone experiences significant worry or stress about not being able to fully complete a task, often stemming from a long, strong desire for perfectionism and the need to achieve 100% completion, leading to feelings of unease even when nearing the finish line of a project or activity. I don't know about y'all, but that sounds like the Chicago Bulls to me, right? And I think that this completion anxiety that Arturas Karnisovas suffers from is going to continue to hurt the Bulls. And I don't even mean just in this next phase. Now, Let me be clear. I've said it before. The Bulls have about a 95% chance to keep their pick. Now, we don't have a 100% chance, and as we know, we are the Chicago Bulls, and anything that can go wrong has go wrong and will go wrong at times for this Bulls team, so there's a little bit of concern there from the fan base, absolutely. But this team, when you look at it, like, it continues to just having its foot in two worlds is one thing, but not being able to complete the things that you want to do is kind of a different thing. Now, they can go hand in hand, make no mistake about it, right? Now, I do think that some of this anxiety comes from wanting to win the trade. Right. And that's fine. I'm not mad at AK holding a proper value for the players that he has on this team. We've undervalued so much that we've gotten rid of on this team that I can't really be mad if AK looks at this and says, listen, I got to overvalue these assets. I got to hold on to my value because we've gotten killed here. But the inability to pull the trigger. For example, I'm going back to the earlier in the season rumored Zach LaVine trade. Now, I get it. It was a rumor. We don't know how close it was. But I'm going to use it as an example here, right? Zeke Najee's contract is $8 million. And make no mistake about it, there's some years left on that contract, right? But if the Bulls really wanted to gain draft assets, and $8 million, keep in mind, Javon Carter's on this team making almost $7 million. So it's not like you don't already have a bad contract. And one of the things that is everybody knows around the NBA, you have to be willing to take on bad contracts sometimes to gain assets. And so the hearing that the Zeke Najee contract is really what stopped that trade from happening, again, rumored, reportedly, you got to look at that and ask yourself, well, okay, what did you expect to happen? Do you really think you're going to get out of the Zach LaVine deal and not take any bad salary back? Now, the year's on it, okay, we can have a conversation about all that. I understand that. But the Bulls aren't a free agent destination. What are you afraid to take the bad money back for? We are not a free agent destination. We are not going to be a free agent destination really anytime soon, right? And, hell, we had an MVP Derrick Rose. Now, injury happened shortly after that, but we never were really a free agent destination then, right? So AK has to get in the game, and eventually he has to pull the trigger on something. And the problem with this completion anxiety that AK has shown that he's developed is that by the time he pulls the trigger, the value's lower. By the time he pulls the trigger, it's too late, right, on some of these things. So, listen, I get it, and I hear we've heard several times now, several different outlets that Vooch, Zoe are on the block, right? And I'm not saying that we should just trade those guys for anything, but like I've said before, and this is why I hold this isn't about Zoe as a player. It's not even really about Nikola Vucevic as a player, even though I think with Vooch, it's a little bit more about how he limits you as a player. We'll get into that a little bit when we talk about trade goals. Or how he limits you as a player. But I think it comes down to if you know these guys are not part of your future, if you know, regardless if Bulls fans agree with it or not, if AK and Eversley know that they do not want to offer Lonzo Ball a long-term contract, you got to get something back for him. It just is what it is. We can have a conversation all day long if he should be in the long-term plans or if he should not be. But if they know that he is not in their long-term plans, and you're going to let him walk for nothing in the offseason, you're going to offer him some low-ball deal that another team's more than likely going to outbid you on, even if it is just a larger part of the mid-level exception. You got to ask yourself the question here of why not pull the trigger and get something back. But then again, completion anxiety is a big thing here with Arturas Karnisovas. We couldn't pull the trigger on anything when the team looked like a playoff team to get us over the hump. And he kind of just let us sit and let us go for the next 3 years as our record got worse and worse each year. We're now on pace to have, the fourth straight year of our record getting worse. And what do we have to show for it? We haven't really developed our players. That's another thing when you talk about completion anxiety. Like, you say that you want to go younger, but you build this whole player development department, but then you allow a head coach to continue to be the one that has to guide their development in game, and he doesn't even do that well. This front office does not complete anything that they start on. And I just look at that and say that that's going to be something that continually limits this team as we try to go forth into whatever the next phase of this team is. And it's unfortunate. But let's keep it moving, though. I want to talk about, in talking about completion anxiety, we got to talk about what the Bulls could look for if they do make a move at the trade deadline. And that's becoming a bigger if every day that goes by. I've been telling you guys for the last couple of weeks, I personally don't think that this team is going to pull the trigger on anything. This completion anxiety topic kind of seals that home for me. I just don't believe that this team is going to pull the trigger on anything. I would love to be proven wrong on that. And then they do something to either, again, it's not about making the team better right away. And even in that, we talked, it said that he wants to make the team better long term. It's about, it's not even necessarily about winning the trade. It's about clearing your direction and gaining assets. But what could be some of the Bulls' goals? I got two on here that if they're looking to try to strengthen this team, that they should look for. And then one that's clear if they're looking more towards just in the future. The first one, interior defense, right? And an athletic big. Jalen Smith and Nikola Vucevic are the Bulls centers. That just is what it is. Regardless of how you agree or look at the position that Jalen Smith should play, he plays center here for the Chicago Bulls. And when you look at it, they average together 1.4 blocks per game. 1.4 blocks per game for two centers combined. That's just not rim protection, right? And this is, again, something that we've known that this Bulls team has lacked, needed, and desired for years. We've known that the Bulls have needed rim protection. Now, we do have a guy who's on the bench sitting that's not playing very much in Matas Vucevic, who's leading the team in blocks per minute, total per game, all that type of stuff. And, playing him a little bit more could actually maybe help a little bit of that rim protection. But, that's a story for another day because Billy Donovan looks at that and says, yeah, who needs rim protection? Who needs that? Who needs that when we can sit somebody in the corner and tell them to jack up threes? Rim protection? We're talking rim protection? That's Billy Donovan when you ask him about rim protection, and Matas Vucevic is actually providing a little bit of that, but that's a story for another day, right? And when you look at it, right, we haven't had somebody on this team who's averaged more than a block per game since Daniel Gafford was on this team. Let that sink in and how long that's been since Daniel Gafford has been off the team, right? And so when you look at it, also how we give up points in the paint right now, the Bulls are giving up a league-high 55.7 points in the paint per game. That's terrible how the Bulls are doing that. So if the Bulls are looking at doing something that's going to help kind of balance out this team a little bit more, to me, if you can bring in some interior defense and rim protection to this team, man, we've been missing that for basically the whole entire time Billy Donovan has been here, right? And then you also look at the Bulls are also allowing that we average the most field goal attempts and success rate within 6 feet in the NBA. So we give up the points in the paint, we give up everything close to the rim, and that's why you see the Bulls defense struggle so much. So I think if you can add some interior defense and rim protection to this team, it goes a long way in helping this team get to the place of just being a more respectable team. The next thing, 3-and-D wings. Like, we need perimeter and point of attack defenders. I get it. Patrick Williams is supposed to be that 3-and-D wing. The three ball isn't falling effectively. The defense isn't falling effectively. So it is what it is, right? I think when you also look at it, somebody like Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, not 3-and-D for Dalen Terry, but we need some guys that can help spread the ball out, right? That can shoot the ball through ball consistently, but we also need some people that can rotate and defend pretty well. And that would help the Bulls. Like, I know that the Bulls give up a lot interior. We just talked about it, right? But it's not just because of the bigs. It's because of our weak point of attack defense, our terrible pick and roll defense, which is included in that as well. It's not just all on the bigs of why we allow so many points in the paint. It's also the fact that we allow so much penetration because we're a terrible defensive team. So that adding some 3-and-D wings could definitely help the Chicago Bulls in that area, right? And so we got to keep if we want to be a better team, again, I have my doubts on if that's the goal that the Bulls are looking for at this trade deadline. But if they really are, if the Bulls are looking at this as something that they want to add to this team between now and the trade deadline to try to just add the balance better, having 3-and-D wings can definitely help that for the Chicago Bulls team. And I think that that's something that we really need. Too bad we gave up some of those guys in Alex Caruso, Derrick Jones Jr., Javonte Green. It is what it is, when it comes down to that. But we can use those guys on this team. And maybe those guys are on the team that's just still developing, sitting behind Billy Donovan's rotation, which, again, I've already kind of killed a little bit, and I don't want to belabor that point anymore. But lastly, and the thing that I think that the Bulls are looking for the most is draft compensation. And I think that that's kind of been evident in some of the rumors that we've heard. The Bulls want to clear their cap sheet. They want to make it kind of more clear picture there, and they want to get and build up some draft assets, recoup some of the assets that they lost, and some of the moves that they made to build a team that eventually only had one playoff series and one playoff win at that, right? So when you look at it as well, the Chicago Bulls have added a nice amount of second-round picks that the Bulls have added over the last time. We have 6 second-round picks between now and 2031. So that's cool there, right? We've added some of that. But there's no doubt that the Bulls need more. Now, we have all our own first-round picks other than one we owe to the San Antonio Spurs that is either going to convey between now and 2028. It has to convey at some point with that, and we'll give that pick to the San Antonio Spurs. But other than that, we do own our own first-round picks outright. But I think when you look at a team that their last few draft picks hasn't really developed into anything meaningful yet, I'll say yet, right? Manas Vucevic, we all kind of see what the future is for Manas Vucevic. We're all kind of promising in that. Julian Phillips has shown some flashes, but nothing consistent yet. Some of that's on him. Some of that is also on the fact that he's not really given a type of role. He's just out there getting minutes in, right? Dalen Terry's starting to look more and more like an NBA player, but at the same time, I don't think anybody really confused that to say that Dalen Terry's shown yet somebody who's like hugely part of your future. Io has worked out for us. We know what Io is, it means to this team, but that's really it as far as draft players that were drafted by the Bulls over the last few years. You actually see more players that were drafted with Bulls picks that ended up working out for other teams than picks and the Bulls ended up keeping that the Bulls drafted. So I think if the Bulls are going to go on this path where, again, but that means that we would have to get over the completion anxiety. If the Bulls are going to go on this path, that it would take more draft compensation so you can get more bites at the apple and try to develop those guys internally. Now, I have my doubts and my thoughts on the Bulls' ability to develop, as most Bulls fans that have watched this team for years do, because we've all seen Billy Donovan. It is what it is when it comes down to that. So we'll see how that ends up shaking out for this team and for the franchise. But I think overall, there's a lot to be left desired for this team, a lot. And I think that overall with the Bulls, it's a disappointing place that we find this team in. And I don't know if any clarity comes. For a while there, I was holding out hope that this trade deadline, if nothing else, would add some clarity for this team. I've come off that more and more as this season has kind of gone on, because I don't. I want to be clear here. With the Bulls having a really good chance to keep their top 10 pick this year, it is possible that clarity does not come until after they make that draft selection. We've seen teams in the past, once they kind of have their pick and they get their guy in the draft, and if the Bulls get a guy that they have on the board that they see as one of their guys, if they get that could provide more clarity for them and kind of more flexibility for the front office to move. Really, the only player that's reportedly that the Bulls are actively taking calls on or shopping that isn't on the books next year is Lonzo, right? Everybody else, Vooch, Zach LaVine, they're both on the board next year. Torrey Craig and Lonzo, let me add Torrey Craig to that. They're really the only two that a decision has to be made at this trade deadline. So, that could provide more clarity. And as the Bulls have also taken calls on other players like Kobe and Io, that can provide more clarity there as well, depending on what position they draft in this draft. Now, I know a lot of Bulls fans look and say, hey, we got to get a center right in this draft. But I think that where the Bulls are and where it seems like they're trying to go via what we've heard, in which that could be wrong, is that best player available is probably what they're going to be looking at, is the best player available. And that could lead to a guard, that could lead to something else, and we'll see what the future holds for that. But we do know what the short-term future holds for this Bulls team, and that's a matchup against the Denver Nuggets. And this is a game in which, after the Bulls have had the type of season that they've had, right? And, a lot of demoralizing losses here for the Chicago Bulls after, some people really thought that this Bulls team at one point, about a month ago now, was really maybe on a path to really kind of start improving some. And it's not. The Bulls have one win since January 12th. They've won 1 out of their last 8 games. 1 out of their last 8 games. And 2 out of their last 10. This is a Chicago Bulls team right now that's struggling. But usually when this happens, that's when the Chicago Bulls pull out a crazy win, right? When you look at our opponents this week, we got Denver, Boston, Toronto, and Detroit all coming up this week. And I would not be surprised if somehow the Bulls end up winning 3 out of these 4 games, because that's just how the season has gone for the Chicago Bulls. Now, when you look at it, coming up against the Denver Nuggets, and over the last 10 games, the Nuggets have the 3rd best net rating in the league, the 2nd best offensive rating in the league, the 9th best defensive rating. They've been an extremely efficient team with the number 1 true shooting percentage and effective field goal shooting percentage. They're the number 1 rebounding team in the league over that time, and they have the best record at 8-2 over the last 10 games. This is a Denver Nuggets team that has completely found their path, and they have found their rhythm to get back to looking like a team that could potentially win an NBA championship or come out the West, or at least make the Western Conference Finals. This is a team that's playing at all cylinders right now. And to think that earlier in the season, this was a team that people talked about could be a trade partner with the Chicago Bulls. I know they're probably glad they didn't make that trade. Not to say that Zach's a bad player, because he's not, but it didn't mess up their chemistry, right? So now you got to look at this, and this is going to be an extremely tough matchup for the Bulls. They're going to have to be on their P's and Q's. And one of the things that the Nuggets do really, really well is half-court execution. That's because they have Nikola Jokic. And that's where the Bulls have really struggled at on offense for them and in defense. And the way that the Nuggets run their offense, especially when it's operating at a high clip, it's really difficult for the Bulls to guard that. Now, one of the benefits is that Nikola Vucevic always guards Jokic really, really well. And so you're going to have to worry about players like Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and these players being the ones that go off on the Chicago Bulls, and if the Bulls are ready and prepared for this. And that's the question that we have to lie into there. Russell Westbrook also has been playing really good. His defense has been really good with being on this Nuggets team. So this is going to be a matchup where the Bulls got to dig in and prepare. And Billy Donovan has to have this team prepared. And I don't know about you, but that's some of the things that make me the most scared about this team, is when you have to rely on Billy Donovan's game planning. So we'll see what the future holds. We'll see if the Bulls can pull this thing together. I hope that they can, for one. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But as always, thank you for tuning in. You guys can follow the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.